Alright, so let's start routing our board. To make our lives easier and also kind of annoying, we're going to put in the ground plane so that some of these air wires go away. So let's go ahead and do just that. We're going to do polygon, make sure the width is 6 mil, and then we can do polygon, draw around the edge. It's okay if you go outside the board, that's perfectly fine. Make sure you make a connection, name it ground, type rats, and rip at semicolon, and some of the ground connections on the top layer should disappear. And see, it's connected. Let's do the same thing. We're going to copy this polygon and place it in the same spot, so it's going to look really weird. And if you notice, you do info and then go to bottom and then click OK. And if you move one of them out of the way, you should see, there we go, one's on the top and one's on the bottom. If you want, you can keep it like this. This is a good way to show that you have two, or you can leave them stacked on each other and then just be aware that there's two. And when we do rats, if we do display minus top, you'll notice that there is indeed a bottom plane now, and they are making appropriate connections, as you can see here and here. So I'm going to display top again so we can see our work. Rip at semicolon. And some of our connections disappeared. It didn't look like much disappeared, and not much did, but this is a good start. Alright, so when you're designing boards or routing boards, there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to think about all at once. And it's kind of hard to give really good general advice other than perhaps starting with your signals, because those are the most important, and you want them to be short in terms of length so that you can keep them noiseless, because the longer they are, especially if they're analog ones, they can pick up a lot of noise from the circuit. And you may notice as you route that you may have to move components around, and that's totally fine. Speaking of which, forgot to place this one, but somewhere around there is fine. We'll see where it ends up being placed later. So where to start? Where to start? I have no idea, but we're just gonna have to start somewhere, and then we'll play around with that. So this is going to be a really long process in general. Half cheating because I'm looking at my original design, but I may even make some mistakes on accident that we may have to end up massaging, and that's just part of the design flow. So let's go ahead and get started then. So I'm going to connect analog ones because these are more important. These should be as short as possible. So let's start with this guy, route. Next I'm going to do MOSI. Trying to put this guy as close as possible, hugging the corners, and the design rule will automatically make sure that we don't go outside of it. Good. Alright, next let's do RX and TX, or in this case where the RX and TX are going to connect to our AVR ISP. So in this case, RX is going to navigate through here and connect to the serial clock. Kind of tight here, so I'm going to move this guy a little bit. There we go, it looks better. It's going to get a little cheeky here and route this guy through here. So the reason why I'm making these so tight is A, I'm slightly confident since I've designed several boards before. The other thing too is the smaller the board, the less it costs, and I have already done several iterations over this board to make it relatively small. I mean, it could probably always be made smaller, but hopefully to give you guys some confidence that you can make things routed really close together. Cool, so those are connected. We still have to connect them to the Bluetooth, and we'll do that in just a moment. Let's get some easy ones out of the way. Let's just do these LEDs. 6 mil is fine for this. Good. Let's go ahead and do thumbstick. We gotta go all the way to that pad over there. And for analog pins, I don't want to use a via if I can help it. We're going to go in between RX here, go along the edge of the wall, take a dive through the middle of these guys, getting wild now. Again against the edge of the wall. Great, and then as you can expect, we're going to dive right into here. Cool, let's knock these guys out really easy or straightforward. I think I had it rotated on our final board, but this looks fine. I probably moved it because I wanted a via here for the grounds. This is good for now. We'll come to that later if need be. Let's see. Let's do the reset. Actually, you want to move this a little bit down if it doesn't cross, and then a little bit over. Good. It looks fine. Alright, so next let's do this RX and TX. So let's do show and click on the air wire and we can see what we need to connect to. And then here, and since I already have this analog guy coming through, we're actually going to need to route something on the bottom. So in general, I try and route everything on the top layer and then leave the ground as unscathed as possible and as a ground plane. But we can't avoid it in every situation. But before we do that, let's finish the reset and connect it to the AVR ISP. The reason why I'm going this way instead of around the state is I don't want it to interrupt the ground plane as much as possible. Should hug the wall as much as I can. There we go. See, it keeps the ground plane nice and continuous. And the reason why I don't do it later is because we're going to have 3 volts come out of the round here, and we'll have to push this one down, but we'll do that when we get there. Alright, now let's do the RX and TX, and I took advantage of connecting this to a pad, and now the route from here to each of these respectively are through a pad, so I don't need a via, so I'll just route on the bottom. Cool. Oh, and then we got to connect MOSI to the LED, so let's do that. So I keep on saying things and then doing something else, and that's because as things come up, you may have to change it, and that's perfectly fine. See, this is a little close, so what we're going to do is we're going to need to push all this stuff down a little bit, and this can actually be very, very painful in some cases. In this case, it shouldn't be bad. We don't need to push everything down, we're just going to push this guy, but you'll notice it changes some of the wiring, so be careful. In some cases, this can throw off some stuff and make it appear unaligned, or even affect the DRC. If I push this down any further, it would start to get in the way of this. The minimum I can do is, I think, where it is now. 1 click away. Let's go ahead and just do that minimum distance. We're still good everywhere else. If anything get messed up on your board, go ahead and fix it. But we should be good to make this clearance now. Yep. Cool. And it's going to connect here. Since we're on the bottom and we need to connect to the top, we're going to need to make a via. If you're using a mouse, just middle click. If you're not, then unfortunately you have to go through this extra step connecting it here. Arcatek tells us that the minimum drill distance we can make is 10 millimeters, and it's not by default here. So we'll put 10 mil, it'll do the math for us, and then we can make the connection here on the top layer. Good. If we wanted, maybe we could have pushed this up a little bit, and then we can make this come as close as we can or want, as long as we don't violate it. And that's some of the massaging that you're going to want to do later. You may not have to do it in every design, it might not be necessary, but try and make your designs pretty. Okay, so now let's continue mission with the RX and TX. And now that we have this bottom device here and we want to make the bottom connection with the RX and TX, it'll help us so that we can line them up nice. So RX in the far corner. Here we are. If you want, you can massage it such that it looks kind of like that. If you want to get rid of that weird stub, it won't actually affect the PCB, but if you want it just to be aligned that perfectly, then you just got to route from the other side sometimes. Now let's route TX on the bottom as well. We'll use this to hug along the wall. Come down the center here, fit in between here if it lets us, and then make the connection here. I want to massage it a little bit, maybe like that close, and this one out if I can. There, it looks nice to me. So let's do a RATS real quick. If you want to see the top layer where we're doing most of the work, just change the layer. And then DRC, so make sure it's Arcatek still. So we got 12 more air wires to go, so we're almost halfway there.